Welcome to the Love is Our Nature podcast, where we discuss all things ranging from love, relationships, authenticity, fulfillment, to lessons from plant medicine journeys, inner healing, and living your truth. I'm not your teacher. I'm only your fellow student. Occasionally, you also get to hear some of my own healing process and journey back to love. The point of the program? That you take away at least one actionable piece of knowledge that supports you in expanding whatever aspect of your life your heart most desires. My name is Cesar Rodriguez. I will be your host, and I am honored to have you here. Happy listening. Welcome to the Love is Our Nature podcast, episode 5. I am so excited today to have one of my very best friends as my guest. And man, that's some good jams. I could leave that on the whole time. Does it make you want to freestyle? I wish I could freestyle.
I wish.
So, all right. So my guest today is a 20-year health and fitness expert. He's been featured on NBC and the Miami Herald. He is the owner of Empower Health, Fitness and Performance, and online fitness bootcamp. He is also the developer of an upcoming fitness transformational program called Breaking Bad, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. So welcome, my very good friend, Dan Hyxson. Welcome, my brother.
What's up, Caesar?
What's going on? What's going on?
Man. So excited.
Yes. So yeah, man, I'm excited to have you. You know, we were talking on the phone the other day, and I'd been thinking about having you on here just because you're somebody that I really admire when it comes to your discipline around your fitness. Like, you make it look so easy. You're like in the shape that I would dream of being, right? And you're like almost 10 years older than me, right? Not to put you out there, right? But everybody's always so surprised.
I'm proud of it.
Everybody was like, oh, I thought he was like 28. What do you mean? So, and you've talked to me about a few things around like the body and what you've learned. So I definitely want to have that conversation. And you suggested, you know what, I want to learn more about like where you're at with this whole journey. So I said, well, let's hop on here. Let's do an episode and have the conversation on here. So that's kind of where we're at. We don't.
Super excited.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I'm excited that you're on here. Thank you for being a loyal listener up until now.
Yeah.
I love the feedback that
I'm a big fan.
Yeah. And here you are. I love the feedback that you've given me so far. And yeah, we don't have much of a format for this conversation other than answering the questions like, what is this healing journey all about? And how is it going? Right. Here I am 3 weeks in Costa Rica. And then allowing people to get to know you and get them to walk away with some nuggets for themselves when it comes to being empowered around not just their fitness, but with everything that matters to them in their life.
Yeah.
Where do we start, Daniel?
Yeah. I mean, okay. So, you know, like we were talking about what, like healing, and you said something pretty like, for me, it was a little shocking to hear you say that. What is it that you said?
Man, now you're asking me to say this on air. Yeah. So it's very interesting, right? Because even though I've gotten present to what I've gotten present to, and I've seen what I've seen, and I've had some very real experiences when it comes to learning about the stuff that I've seen has been unexplored for me, whether you want to call it my psyche, my emotional self, or whatever the case may be. Like I really got connected to what's been there that I've not taken care of in the past, and I set out to go take care of it, and mostly like get to know it. And for sure, I've had a real experience around what's there. There's this very logical part of me that kind of scoffs at the whole thing, like, which is what I told you, like, man, like what, like sometimes this whole healing thing seems like bullshit, right? Like, or like stupid. all this stuff about
A lot of people will be upset with you saying that.
right. I know, right? Like the inner child. My other guests, what would they say? But no, I've shared that with them too, and I actually asked them those hard questions. Like, I asked Molly in episode 3, like, what would you say to somebody that says something like, "Why don't you just, drop this whole healing thing and just go have fun, enjoy your life? Isn't that what life is about?" And my last guest on episode 4, Kavisha, who's a breathwork practitioner who specializes in inner child healing, I asked her, like, what's this whole inner child thing all about? I always thought that was a concept up until my very last plant medicine ceremony where I saw a 4-year-old version of myself that
Right.
was in pain. But even still, what would you say to people that say, like, there's no inner child anywhere? Like if I cut you open, I don't find an inner child there. Like, you're a grown adult. Why are you doing messing around with this inner child idea?
Right.
So yeah, that's the answer to your question, I guess.
And it's what's interesting for me is like, okay, so I'm kind of more of a physical kind of person. Like I want to see it, I want to feel it, I want to measure it. And to me, healing happens in the body, of course. Like when you get injured, your cells replicate and they restore themselves. As long as the body is in a proper environment to create that. But when you say things like that, like, oh, heal your inner child, I'm like, oh, come on. So I'm kind of with you on that. Like, I'm more like a mechanistic kind of mentality, like very, but I'm always open to, like what I don't know, but we've both done Landmark and we're both well aware of our blind spots. And I know that for me, like, there are things that I don't understand, So when people talk about healing in that sense, like energy healing and breath work healing, I'm like, okay, tell me more.
Yeah.
I won't shut it out, but I'm very skeptical.
Yeah, exactly. And I've been around the same, like standing in a similar place where for me it's thankfully I developed the humility to realize, like, okay, there's probably things that I don't know. Right. And have kept like a beginner's mind or a student's mind around things. Right. So I'll give anything the time of day when I'm first learning about it. And sure, there's some things out there that I still, that I'll still question even after I gave it that time of day. And then there's some things that after I do give them the time of day, I'm like, whoa, like, yeah, like this was definitely something. Right. Like cacao ceremonies, for example, I've done a couple and I don't know what the deal is around cacao ceremonies, other than them, like, it's very pure from the earth, and it's and I think for that, like, I'm still a student around that. I actually haven't even looked into the properties of cacao a whole lot. So I don't know, but what else?
Can I ask you a question?
Of course, that's what you're here for. You want to ask me some questions?
I will ask you a lot of questions. Okay, like one, and I wonder if people also wonder the same thing. How did we end up here? Like where did you? First of all, like when you went into all this, you and I had a conversation back when, before you left to Costa Rica. About this is kind of a very impromptu decision that you made. You just kind of decided, you know what, this is something I want to do. And then you left Landmark, which we both used to lead for Landmark. And and then you've taken this path, and a lot of it was based on a lot of the things that you saw during a lot of the ceremonies you attended. Yeah. And you've just been following your intuition, I think, for the most part, right? Something like that, yeah. Even hearing you say, like, following my intuition, there's that very logical part of me that scoffs at that. Like I don't have some guiding spirit that I'm following. Like, but you get what I'm saying? Like, there's always that constant tug of war. And the answer is yes. I have been following something. I've been trusting something
bigger than my rationale, bigger than my logic, and something that I have a hard time explaining, but something that feels right.
What do you, okay. And I know you've been trusting it,
Hmm.
right? So what do you call that? What is that thing?
The thing that I'm trusting.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Because it goes against your logic for the most part. Sounds like it.
Right. Totally. Totally. That's a great question. What do you call the thing that I've been trusting? Such a great question, because I feel like we're getting into names, like into labeling things, right? Like I could label it something, right? And I think that I know quite a few people in the spiritual community that I've met in the past few years, and I know they also talk about trusting something or like receiving some guidance, and I've heard all kinds of different names or labels for this thing, and I think it's the same thing, right? Some people call it the higher self. Some people call it the universe. Some people call it God. Some people call it the soul. Some people call it my ascended masters, right? Or my spiritual teachers.
Right.
So if
So
you
which
ask
one's yours?
me,
Which
which
one's
one am
yours?
I trusting? I don't know. It's one of those, one of the above or all of the above. Can I leave it at that? um, you, you mentioned the last ceremony, and I did share in episode 3 towards the end how this started for me. But what I didn't share is exactly what I saw towards the end. I think I shared with Molly that I saw this 4-year-old version of myself that was totally unattended to. And even though through the work that we did on Landmark, I understood what happened when I was 4 and what decisions I made, like what qualities I took on, like the cautiousness, the lack of being vulnerable, lack of sharing my feelings. Like I understood all that, right? And then I even had breakthroughs around it, right? Like I created results that in the past I wouldn't have, like sharing myself and telling a girl I like her or that I want to take her out with zero evidence that I like her. So I went into that, and I shared with Molly how like the even though I understood all that 4-year-old was still in pain, and how I saw that.
Okay, wait. That's
Yes.
great. So what do you mean that 4-year-old is still in pain? What does that even
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
What 4-year-old?
Well, um, yeah. So I'm a total novice at all this, right? And
Well, you know, when you speak about it, it sounds like very definitive.
yeah, when I say
Like
it,
the
when I call it a
4-year-old is
4-year-old,
like, it sounded very solid.
right, right. I can only
And
speak from my experience, right? So I
so
saw the four year
where
old
is this
version of
4-year-old
myself.
and where's the pain?
The interesting thing is, if you talk to quantum physicists or shamans, like they'll tell you how um, everything exists at the same time. The Everything that for us we interpret as the past, and everything that for us we interpret as the future, it's actually here right now. It's like there's all these planes of existence.
Infinite
Um,
possibilities
yeah, and the possibilities don't
or
just mean the future,
probabilities. Even. Yeah.
right? So from that viewpoint, the 4-year-old still exists now, and 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 that you could look at it from there. The other place you could look at it from that I think you'll appreciate more, because I also appreciated it more because it makes more sense to the logical mind, is that our bodies remember, like our cells are intelligent, and these memories, painful memories of things that happened to us when we were younger, get recorded into our bodies. And you talk to some of our good friends that practice traditional Chinese medicine, they'll explain to you also how in acupuncture, like and in traditional Chinese medicine, you learn that that certain body organs carry different emotions that you've been hanging on to, right? Whether
Right.
it's guilt, shame, resentment, anger, all that, right? Like you're harboring.
In my world,
Uh-huh.
that the way that translates is that you have your brain, depending on what the stimulus is, it releases neuropeptides
Yeah.
that communicate to the hypothalamus or the pituitary gland, and
Mm-hmm.
those neuropeptides trigger neurotransmitters to go down your central nervous system and trigger responses within certain organs, right? So you
Yeah.
have like adrenaline or cortisol and
Yeah.
several in different combinations. So kind of
There you
like
go.
it's like what you're saying. And then those patterns actually get routed to become efficient.
Right.
So I get that what you're saying.
Exactly.
But even the thing you said about like how we exist in different planes, because I've been kind of flirting and I've been dating quantum physics.
Uh-huh.
Like we're not serious. We went on a few dates,
You can.
and and I've got to know her a little bit. And one of
Yeah.
the things I learned about her is that she says that there are infinite possibilities. So like
Mm-hmm.
you can say that you can exist at the same time as your 4-year-old self.
Yeah.
Like I kind of understand that
Yeah.
because me and quantum physics.
Yeah. And I've had experiences where I'm in a plant medicine ceremony, and there's times where I'm there like laying down on the ground and I'm seeing like a stack of timelines. And I'm like, wow, like there's all these different timelines for the very next moment than this moment. And I could step into any of
Wow,
these.
that's so
So
cool.
cool. Yeah, it's been quite interesting.
All right, so
Kind of like
going
the
back
movie
to the healing
Interstellar.
stuff. Now I think I'm starting to get it.
Okay.
Now
What are
I
you
think I'm
getting?
starting to get it. The thing about the healing. So I actually looked up the word healing in
Mm-hmm.
the dictionary because
Yeah.
I wanted to get a clear definition, right? When people talk about
What does it
healing, what
say?
are they really saying? Okay, so it says the noun is the act or process of making or becoming whole, sound or well,
Mm,
or the means of making whole, curing, curative, restorative, soothing. So
that's perfect.
that sounds about accurate, right?
Yeah, that's what healing is. I mean, for me, that definition captures it perfectly, right? Where healing is just going back to having the experience, not just the understanding, right? Because it's easy for us to understand that we're whole and complete and perfect and we're not lacking anything, right? Or there's nothing we need to get rid of. Like it's easy to understand that at the level of concept. However, at the level of experience, like experiential, like at an existential level, getting to whole and complete, I think takes a little bit more than what it takes to understand it. Right. So I think that's what healing is getting to the point where in our experience we're whole and complete. There's nothing that I'm missing that I need to go find somebody to give me so that I can be validated or my existence justified. Does that make
So
sense?
when we talk about the other forms of healing, like the sound healing and
Mm-hmm.
breath work, you know, I mean, I don't understand that. I'm not familiar with it. And but how do you see what you're up to? Because I think you definitely have. I've known you. We've been in we've coached programs together, and a lot of the programs that we coach require people to really deal with their past. And you've done a lot of heavy work with people, so I think you are in a position to be able to bring that. Um, and honestly, to me, you're one of the most intuitive people I know
Really?
when it comes to like really being with people and like seeing what's underneath.
Mm,
You definitely have a knack for that.
mm.
So when we talked about healing, and when you said earlier about like how it's kind of like ridiculous, I was wondering, I'm like, what part of that was the part that felt ridiculous to you?
Yeah. Yeah. So that was me speaking from like the ego, right? Like again, because I'm a novice at this whole world of healing. There's times that is what's there for me. That your question is, what part of this whole healing thing is ridiculous? And what I was sharing at that moment was that the whole thing kind of seems ridiculous. Like where, like Caesar, where are you trying to get to? Like why not just go make the best of life? Like what is there to pursue, right? Because it's so easy to lose sight of it. See, because the whole thing is abstract. The whole thing's abstract. So sometimes it's easy to just pretend that it's not there, which I think is what most of us do. I think most of us just pretend that we are not hurt, pretend that we are not resentful, or pretend that we are not resigned, right? Resigned about whatever. And we create a life that is a seemingly great life, right? I mean, shit, I definitely have a great life, right? My relationship with my family is better than it's ever been. My business is better than it's ever been. I have team members now that we're in a position to scale the business. And so yeah, it's almost like it could have very easily just continued that way. And I even had some pretty great relationships with partners. There's relationships that I had that like we could have just been like, all right, cool, let's have children, and let's raise them, and it'll be a great life. But it's funny. I think the one thing that has remained, that has
Who is
always
that? I
been
want
there.
to know. You can tell me later. I definitely want to know.
The thing that's always been there for me pretty consistently, and I think this is kind of like a double-edged sword, right? It's both a strength, perhaps a weakness, is this tug towards extraordinary, right? This tug towards like, no, there's more available. Not like pursuing some carrot on the donkey, like getting to a certain point of success that's out there somewhere that we're probably never going to reach. No, more just like having this be heaven on earth. Does that make any sense?
Well, when we had that conversation yesterday on the phone, and we talked about, you were sitting on the beach, right?
Mm.
And it's just like you're just hanging out with this random dude.
Chris.
He offers you a beer, and he's like, "Hey," and
Yeah.
how
Yeah, I
you're
saw
like,
he has starting a fire, and I'm like, oh snap, a
yeah.
fire! Like a third of a mile down, and I grab a stick, and I'm like, hey, I got a stick.
And what is it that I think it was either you or he said, like, he said, if I'm gonna be miserable, or if I'm gonna be poor, or he said
Yeah,
something like,
he said if I'm gonna be broke, I might as well be broke somewhere beautiful.
yeah.
And he was in such great spirits. We got the fire going. We're drinking beers. We sit, look at the sky. We could see the stars at that point, and he's like, "Doesn't suck to be us, dude. Doesn't suck to be us." And I'm like, "No, not at all."
So what you were saying, I think, I get it. Here, I'm here, right? We're in the States right now. I'm in Miami,
Mm-hmm.
and I wake up, and I mean, I have intentions, right? I have things that I want to accomplish every day. I have goals, money that I want to make. I have results I want to produce for clients. I have stuff I want to be able to provide for my daughter. And but I think sometimes I forget that, like, I'm that's not what life is,
Mm.
you know?
So what is life?
And I really believe that it's just being present.
Mm.
Like life is happening right now, and sometimes where I am is I'm like 25 minutes, an hour, 2 days away from now,
Mm.
trying to live that life versus the one I have right here, right now. And
Yeah.
and it's like, yes, of course, I got to take care of stuff. I have my responsibilities and my obligations, but I don't. I find myself not enjoying what I'm doing because I'm not present, because I'm just trying to get things done to get to the next carrot, like you were saying.
Yeah.
So I think my experience is like sometimes lost with my I guess my whole I don't know what you'd call that. It's my like not it's maybe it's a fear, maybe. Um but it's like this compensation almost.
Mm-hmm.
Like things aren't supposed to be this way. So I got to keep going, keep going, keep going, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And really things, like we learned, things are what they are, right? And they're not what they're not, and we can be happy
Yeah.
with just what it is. But I think that's it's a very hard thing to try to remember. I don't know how I
That's
got into this conversation.
no.
We
This
started
is
off with
perfect.
healing, but
No,
it's like,
this is perfect because we're addressing what us human beings make life about, right? And it's probably the most worthwhile conversation, and like I think humans can have, because yeah, we, especially in the Western world, we get conditioned to have life be about getting somewhere, right? And then before we know it, we miss life,
yeah.
right? Um, I forgot which was there was some guru online that says like if you watch people die, it's like the very last 5 seconds right before they died is like they finally understood what life was about, and he's like, like this they go, when it finally hits them, like, wow, they wasted their life like in the doing of stuff,
Yeah,
trying to get somewhere and do something and achieve something, and then they missed it, right? And what a sad way to go,
I
to
know.
have missed life, right? So, and that's what Eckhart Tolle talks about. I'm listening to The Power of now, and I was familiar with his work, but I just never really read his books, and his knowledge. I mean, the concept that he talks about in that book is quite spread in many different other places. It's not the only place where you'll find it, where he talks about presence. He talks about being, right? And he talked about how he was suicidal, and he couldn't live with himself anymore. He's like, I just can't live with myself. And then he's like, wait a second, like who who is the I that can't live with myself, right? Like there must be somebody else, right? And like in that moment, he like had this experience of separation, and like,
Mhm.
and he got that that voice was not him, right? It was the ego, and then he went on to have this experience of bliss, right? So he had a pretty powerful experience, right? And that might be what people call enlightenment. I think it's also oftentimes what we refer to as transformation, when you realize that none of all that chatter, none of all your thoughts, worries, concerns, like none of that is who you are.
That's so it right there.
Yeah, and then he goes on to talk about how for 2 years, for the next 2 years, he sat in a park bench 2 years straight every day, and he was in a constant state of bliss. Like he didn't have to be skydiving, he didn't have to be eating caviar and lobster. Like no, he was just sitting on a park bench in constant bliss until eventually he went on and started doing something else, teaching people. So it takes me back to, I got present to something when you were sharing yourself and to what it is, like what, so then what's the drive, right? Like, why don't we just all go and be present? Why don't I just go and hang out with Chris by the fire at the beach all day for like the rest of life? And it could go that way. And here's the cool thing. There's no right or wrong way to go, right? Like there's no right or wrong way. It could go that way, and it would be great. What's there for me, and this is where what I've really been developing a lot of respect for, is that every single person's journey, to call it that, I keep using that word, and that's just what I'm going to call it for sake of simplicity. Like everyone's journey is different, and I think it would really serve people to just get in tune with themselves and find like what is their truth, like what is their passion, like what do you want to create in this life. So I think the thing that has me take on this healing journey, now that we're thinking about it a little bit deeper, is that sure, it's unnecessary. You know, I can spend the rest of my days like playing with my nephews. There's probably nothing I enjoy more than playing with my nephews, and then having poker night with you and the guys. I mean, we've talked plenty about how epic those nights are, you know,
Yeah.
and we could be in relationships that are nice. You know, we could have great sex. We could eat great food. However, what I'm seeing, the thing that keeps me going is that what is in the back of my mind for me, that sooner or later kind of pokes at me is, hey, what about others?
Wow. So got that.
Yeah. And it wasn't till I heard Teal Swan. I never heard about this concept, and I don't know much of her content, but this woman named Teal Swan she's got quite a presence on YouTube. She talks about how like a lot of the masters now say like how the moment you reach enlightenment, you realize you're not enlightened. Because if you think about enlightenment, sometimes it's also referred to as unity consciousness. You get that you're all of it. And when you're all of it, and it's all perfect, whole, and complete, like the moment you arrive there, because you're in the experience of being all of it, and the person down there is totally miserable and suffering or starving or whatever, in that moment, you're not enlightened anymore. Because if you're that person and that person is suffering, which is the opposite of enlightenment, then you're not so enlightened, are you?
Mm.
So,
You know, I was going to say earlier,
yeah.
and to the point of a lot of these like celebrities, you know, billionaires, millionaires, that they all after a certain amount of money, what most of them will do is they'll go into philanthropy.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think at a certain point, when survival's not an issue anymore,
Mm-hmm.
you know, when I think that's what most of us, shouldn't speak for all of us, but I can say for myself, it kind of turns into when it, you know, I wake up, I obviously love what I do, you know, and I got a lot of fulfillment from making a difference for people.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also that aspect that I have bills to pay and things to take care of. Like if money wasn't an issue for me, I would be trying to do as much as I can for people. And I think fundamentally we all have that desire to want to make a difference, but we're so caught up in our own survival that it's just, we don't have the space to even see it. So I appreciate what you're doing. You're kind of going around the normal way of doing things. I would say that's enlightening because you're already trying to do something that's going to make a difference for people. Like you're already trying to do something, you know, you left the life that we have here is just like the going out and the, you know, like busy work and trying to do business, and like you're still doing your business, but you're doing it with the intention of creating more space and more resources for you to do what it is that you really want. And
right.
I get that.
I appreciate what you're saying. And I think even business, right? Like now you brought up business, I think most people in our Western society, if you ask them, like, hey, if you didn't have to worry about money anymore, like if you had all the money in the world, like, would you go to work the next day? Right? I think most people would say no. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you don't like what you do, for sure.
Right. I mean, shoot, I personally, if I had all the money in the world, I wouldn't continue doing my marketing business, like for what? And that's also part of what I'm at work on right now is creating something that if money were no object, I would still do it. It's kind of like this for me, here we are. It's Sunday night.
Yeah.
It's Sunday night. You and I could be doing many other things. And here we are both excited about having this conversation, about sharing it with people, So that, I think we're in a very interesting transition period in the world right now, where we are transitioning into a whole new way of life, a whole new energy, for lack of a better word, that's going to have the world go around. Right now, money makes the world go around. Everybody's got to pay their bills. They got to pay rent, right? They need a place to live. They got to buy food. So right now, that's kind of the main thing that makes the world go around. There's no way around it, at least for the majority. And I think that we're in a transition period where that's going to be changing, where we have to make room for that aspect because, that's the world we were born into. We were born into a world where we needed diapers bought for us. We needed to buy formula for the baby, right? Mm-hmm. It didn't just fall from the sky. So that's just another interesting point, that most of us are doing something that if we had a choice, we would not do it. And yeah, I think that the only way to really support people with this is to lead by example, because I think it would be really cool to live in a world where everybody's fulfilled. Can you imagine, like, everybody is doing what they love?
Yeah, we wouldn't have any wars or anything like that, for
right.
Sure.
Everybody's happy. So yeah, that's also like what I'm out to discover for myself, is like, what would it look like to be able to lead by example for people, that whatever trauma they have, they can actually take on whatever pathway I discover is available for them. They can take that on for them to experience themselves as being whole and complete. Same thing with work and vocation. You might not like what you do right now, and maybe that's fine, that if you do that for a little bit longer, but you can also create a life where you're totally lit up about what you're doing.
Yeah. It's funny. You and I, mm-hmm. I didn't realize how, I mean, I kind of did, but I didn't at the same time, now that we're having this conversation. So like, for those of you who don't know me, what I do is I provide fitness programs online for people. And I have a gym that I also have live classes at. And, and that's kind of what I've been doing. Like, people come here, they do their workouts, helps them feel better about themselves, be healthier, get in shape. But there's always been something for me that's been missing. Mm-hmm. And in regards to what the kind of difference that I would like to make with what I do. And there's a statistic, because the majority of the clients that I get are weight loss clients, like people that are trying to lose weight. That typically if you can have anybody, like you get like 500,000 people trying to lose weight, maybe 5 million, right? Every year. And out of those 5 million, only 5% actually have an effective weight loss, which will be 10% of your total weight. And that's in the first year. And after 3 years, that number goes down to 3. And after 5 years, that number goes down to 1. Wow. So in actuality, the people that actually lose weight and maintain it is only really 1% of the people that actually try to do it. Mm. And I live in a world that people don't know that statistic, you know, and I keep providing the same solution to a problem that doesn't work. Like I put a Band-Aid on a dam.
So you provide the vehicle that falls into that same statistic.
Yeah. You know,
Gotcha.
So people come and they exercise. And for me, like it's been really difficult to do that, because I realize that like what ultimately I want is I want to make a difference. And although I do make a difference in the short term, it hasn't been the kind of difference that like really impacts people.
Right.
Which is like, you know, and this year, I mean, actually last year, I had to revisit that, you know, and I developed this program that's going to be coming out, which is called Breaking Bad, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, plug. And, you know, that program was built on the premise that in order for people to have a lasting result, they have to break the habit of being who they are. And part of the typical weight loss journey for most people is doing the same thing that they've done in the past that only worked for so long. And they'll keep coming back to doing it over again. So I guess my whole point is that like you know, you wanna take people and heal their traumas. Like I want to break people out of their prison of who they think they are for themselves, and unleash something that they don't even know exists inside of them. You know, and one of the ways that I've been experimenting with myself, and Cesar, you know this because I've been talking about it a lot, is like the cold shower thing. Right. So I started taking cold showers. And that whole thing came up because I felt kind of stuck. And this happened it's already been probably 2 months that I've been doing this, but I felt stuck and I needed something to really shift me. So I just decided to start taking cold showers, and that little step alone has me dealing with things that I didn't even know I wasn't dealing with, like procrastination, confronting fear, dealing with discomfort and being comfortable with being uncomfortable, like really uncomfortable. And also really understanding how much I can deal with, how much stress I can handle. And that's been just a simple thing like that has been so life altering for me, you know. And I think that.
Sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I'm done.
Okay. No, what I was going to say is that I think that's so brilliant, because I heard this interview. Somebody interviewed a shaman, a woman who's been a shaman for 40 years, and she's very established in the community. And she spoke about how, like, the beauty of ceremony, the gift of ceremony, the blessing the ceremony is. And she says that ceremony is her passion. And she says anything can be a ceremony. You know, she says you can walk outside, pick up a stick from the ground, break that stick, and have that symbolize for you breaking the ties between you and somebody with whom the relationship doesn't work. So your cold shower, that's a ceremony.
Yeah, that's called, I call it the rebirth.
Yeah.
Every time,
you know,
it's like I die.
There you go. No, what I love about that. Yeah, what I love about that is that you're having it be in service of something. You're not just going randomly into the cold shower because you like it or because you got bored of the hot water. Like, no, you're doing it with a commitment of breaking the barriers, like, of your limitations, and stepping into the boundlessness of what's possible, right? And by the way, I love that you shared that with me before I came down here, because I've been taking cold showers now for 21 days, not by choice. I just get to take cold showers. And if it wasn't for you creating that context around cold showers for me, I don't know how I would have done it. I would have probably like just changed Airbnb or something, or maybe not. But yeah, that is so cool. You know, I think that's something that people can take advantage of for themselves, is, you know, create a ceremony for yourself. Like, what could you do in your physical space to have that be symbolic of something that you're passionate about, that you want to create for yourself in your life? So that's really cool.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
it's really, really cool.
Yeah,
like, it's super cold.
You know, and now that you got into what you're fitness and what you do, which, by the way, I relate to what you said, right? You're like, I've been making a difference, but not the difference, right? It's the same for me, where right now I help local business owners, mostly dentists, get more patients from the internet. And I realize the difference that makes for them, right? For those dentists, those business owners, and how they get to employ men and women, and they get to put food in their on the tables for their families, and I think that's all awesome. But for me also, it's been like, all right, but that's not the difference. I think that's great, but I think there's more we could do. So one thing I've been incorporating in my business that I will eventually train other businesses to also take on for themselves is a community impact program. And it's not anything very innovative, perhaps, but yeah, like what if every company with a profit of their, a percentage of their profits, they put it back into some community project that would make life better for people in the community or people in the world. So like with us, we donate a portion of our profits to Operation Smile, since we work with dentists, and this organization does really great work with kids in underdeveloped countries around cleft lip and cleft palate, right? It provides reconstructive surgeries for them so that they can properly feed and all that. So that's, if it weren't for that, not only, it's not even a doubt or a question. I've been there. Like I would have no motivation for building my company. And something that you said earlier also reminded me of this. Like it kind of took me back to the title of this podcast. At the end of the day, love is our nature. So that's why we don't settle. I think you and I don't settle because there's something in us, which is also in everyone, perhaps, that really wants others to be well off. And sure, we got our egos that sometimes don't care at all about that. But I think there's this part that perhaps is even stronger, because I would assert it's in our essence of who we are, that wants to take care of other people. You want to make that difference. I think that's at the end of the day what people want to do, is they want to know that they made a difference for somebody else. That's how we get to have the experience that life mattered. We came here and we made a contribution. So where do we go from there?
What I was saying was that, and maybe this, I don't know if this resonates for other people, but this is something that's been there for me, is that whole thing about, that you said love is our nature, right? And ultimately what we want to do is we want to be there for other people. And then when we're not that, here we go, we're full circle now. Mm-hmm. I think what's there when we're not that, we're not being our nature, is the trauma that we are trying to protect ourselves from being hurt or being abandoned. And, and I see this with my clients too, which is kind of interesting because it shows up physically with people in certain ways too. But I think when you don't feel like you're enough, you don't put yourself out there. You don't have it in you to want to make a difference because you don't have it within yourself, or you do, you just don't see it.
Yeah.
Because you got your own little stuff going on. And I think what you're up to is probably one of the most impactful things, because it gives people the opportunity to let go of that limitation that keeps them from being the ones that can actually make a difference for people.
Yeah.
And go, which is healing, which means that you're bringing people to being whole again. Right. And if you're whole again, you don't want to see another person not be that.
Exactly. That's what I think what we all have in common. I've looked at this quite a bit. I mean, I have such a logical mind, that I always want to rationalize everything. So when it comes to these big questions, right, when And I have a very good friend also that I would talk about these things, and he asserted like that at the core of it, there's just nothing, right? Like there's just meaninglessness, and everything else is just meaning that we add. And I started kind of having a counter argument to that, because I'm like, well, with human beings, right? Like, so are we innately good or bad, or like good or evil, right? And I think that's a tough question, right? Because people will say like, oh, like if you put food there, like people, like babies will fight for it, like they'll want to eat it, right? But I think we also have obviously like our reptilian brain, right? Like we are gonna have like animalistic sense of survival, and sure, but I think we evolve and we transcend, right? Like, I definitely can't say it off the top of my head, but like some in the East, they talk about like the different levels of consciousness that we transcend into. And sure, like when you talk about survival, you're talking about like the very base one. But what I would say to my friend is, I don't know that I know a person that I've ever ran across somebody that if they were to have all the food that they could eat right in front of them, like there's a self-refilling plate, like a buffet, right? Where like you're just eating and like you're so full and it's your favorite food and like you're eating like crazy. Now you're like extremely full. And there's somebody next to you who's starving and you're allowed to hand it over, not like a typical buffet restaurant where you're not allowed to, like if you, let's say you could. I don't know anybody that wouldn't be like, yo, here's a piece of chicken. Like,
Well, let me ask you this. What if you would lose the plate and you would never have it back again?
if what?
Let's say you have somebody that's starving, right?
Uh-huh.
You can give your plate to them, you fill yourself up, you get your fill. But once you give them the plate, you will never have it back again.
Well, now you're changing my example. It's a whole different.
I'm
It's
just
a whole
saying.
different game. the what the I think what we illustrate though is that if we really by nature were evil, we would take joy in seeing that person starve, right? So yeah, your example takes it back to survival. Like, oh, if I give them the plate, then like I lose the benefit, right? And depending on your upbringing or whatever, like you'll make decisions. You don't see an old lady trip in front of you or you or anybody, I don't think, like watch her trip and you laugh like, oh my God, that lady ate it. I hope she broke something. Like, who does that? Nobody does that. So
okay. Some people laugh though.
Sure. And maybe you make sure she's okay first. Maybe it was really funny the way she laughed. Like, look, and that's me. My mom will tell you, I'm sure my mom's watching this. She's my number one fan in the podcast. Love you, Mom. My mom has always called me out on my sense of humor. I'm the guy that when you're at the movies and watching like a scary movie or something, which I don't really watch anymore, and somebody would like run into the forest because they're running from the killer and they they fall into a well. The person falls into the well, where all the zombies are. I start laughing. I'm like, what's the chances that you fall into the well? So I have like some weird radar for laughter, but that's a movie. So sure, there's going to be some laughter and somebody falls in a way that it was really funny, but there's going to be that side of you that is really going to look out and like, if that person's okay.
Yeah.
And why I'm talking about all this, because that's what it takes me back to the whole theme of this podcast and this whole message, that something that I saw for myself, which inspired me to create all this 3.5 years ago, when I had a very intimate experience with reality. First with my body. My body was part of this 3D world, and I saw the same material, to call it that, in the trees, on the grass, on the soil, in the air. Everything was made of the same thing. And I saw that if we were to cut this dimension open and we're able to look inside of it with the right tools, then we could see that the building blocks of this reality is love. Like that's what we're all made of. That's what everything in this reality is made of. That's what keeps it all together. That was my experience. So that's when I was like, wow, maybe it isn't all just empty and void of meaning. I think there is like an innate foundation by nature. I love the word nature because of its meaning. We use the word nature sometimes referring to like the natural world, like the trees, the plants, but that's not what I mean by nature. When I say nature, I mean the nature of something, which is kind of like your essence. Like, oh wow, the nature of a shark will have a shark eat other fish or something. That's just its nature, right? The
Like
lion
it's
eats
like
zebra by
at its
nature.
purest. That's
Right,
what it.
right. So that's why I call it love is our nature, because in my spiritual journey, that's what I realized. That's what I saw for myself, and through just observation of the world, I saw that wow, like love is our nature, and you see it in the natural world too. You see you see it in the animals, you see it in the plants,
Yeah.
you see it in the cosmos. The way everything just supports each other, and yeah, you could rationalize how that's all by coincidence and is by science that it works that way. But I think sooner or later you will see something else. So then, what's the point of any of that? I guess the point of all of that is, the question about why this journey, why this healing, why love is our nature, why any of it. I think, yeah, like I don't think. Look, I was lucky. I didn't have a very traumatic experience happen to me, at least that I can remember. I think it's silly how like what I talk about when I was 4 years old was that I gave a paper heart to a girl I had the warm and fuzzies for in pre-K. She came back and she wrinkled it up and she was like, "This heart's garbage," right? And she stomped away. And yeah, that was like the defining moment for me where I was like, "Wow, like
Yes,
I'm not gonna share my feelings because it's dangerous and it really hurts." And I didn't do for 25 years. And that's what I found really interesting with Kavisha in the last episode that I recently just published, is that she said there's two types of traumas. There's shock trauma, the things that we typically think about when we hear the word trauma, right? Rape, somebody died in front of you or something like that.
Yeah.
But then she says there's also developmental trauma, which happens over time. And she explained how like the impact is the same. That could be like a deprivation of love. You wanted somebody to hold you, they didn't hold you. The impact is the same. So yeah, I think that's what this whole thing's about. If it were just about me, like, yeah, I'd probably just be hanging out with Chris at the beach, tell you to come over, bring some beers. We'd have some
Well, in
fun.
a way, look, in a way, it isn't. I think it is about you in that you're trying to pursue what's in your heart. And I think you want to you listen to your compass by following what really, number one, I think challenges you.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I think, what you say, like, I'm a novice at this.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very expert thing to say. Like I've been doing what I do for 20 years, and I still feel like I don't know anything. Like I don't know anything. Like I feel like I know nothing.
Right.
But you can ask me about anything and I'll know it, but I don't know anything.
Right.
So I think that's great that that's the space that you come from, because I think that gives you the opportunity to really discover from people what's there for them.
Yeah.
And that you have the courage to follow your intuition and to follow your guide, whatever we're going to call the guide, right? And so I think that I'm excited. Number one, that you're doing this podcast. This is like, this came out of left field for me. I was like, whoa, you're doing a podcast too? I thought when you said it, it's like one of those things, people tell you, oh, I'm going to do this thing. And you're like, yeah. And they, and it never happens. I know because
Right.
I'm guilty of that. But I was like, oh, like it was published, and I was like, oh crap, let me just listen. I'm gonna support my friend. It's probably gonna be like very like, yeah, whatever. If you're listening to this now, you haven't listened to that first one, like incredible. They got me. Like I was like hooked. I was like, this is good.
Yeah.
So I think you're definitely doing what you were. Maybe using the word meant to do is one of those. It's kind of cliche, but I think you're definitely doing what you want to do.
Right.
And I think a lot of people don't. A lot of people, including me, sometimes even we don't do what we want. We do what we need to do,
Yeah.
quote
Yeah.
unquote.
Yeah. And then that brings up a whole other aspect of things for me in this conversation too, because here's where we can have a debate about this, which we won't, I think, for the sake of time. But many people will say, Carolyn Miss, I don't know if it's Carolyn Miss or Carolyn Mice, I think it's Miss. She wrote a book called Sacred Contracts, right? And she talks about how our soul determines what is the experience that we want to have before we come down to earth.
Oh, that thing, yeah.
Yeah.
Not by now.
I was very skeptical about that, but honestly, dude, I don't know. For me, it still goes either way. I probably would lean more towards it than not at this point, given my experience. I think that I don't want to sound all altruistic. I said that, oh yeah, the reason I'm doing my healing journey is so that I can help other people. Like, no, there's an aspect of it that is totally all about me, because the truth is, there was to a certain extent, like I was unhappy with myself, even though I had a great life. I had things going for myself. And this is where I think people have to be really keen and learn to listen, spend some time alone and learn to listen to their inner self. Because for me, my unique expression of that was like, wow, yeah, like this is not it. Like something's missing. And I was unhappy with not going there. Right. Like I had said I would start this podcast like 3 years ago when this things first started. And that's why after like the ceremony in December of 2020, that's when I was like, yeah, it's time. It's going to go however it's going to go. Yeah. On episode 1, the first thing you hear is, hey, can you hear me? Are we live? Because I didn't care about perfection anymore. I realized there was something that at a very deep level that I think is what people call a soul level. I wanted, or my soul wanted, that for as long as I was not exploring that or was not experiencing that or going into that direction, I wasn't going to be happy. So yeah, I forgot why I got into that part of it. But I think the point was that maybe we come into this world with something unique to us that we really want to experience or we really want to create. And up until we're doing that justice, there's going to be like that poke or that itch or that underlying feeling of dissatisfaction of like, man, there's something missing.
What's that poke for you? What's your poke?
For me, it was, and it's a big deal for me that I'm saying the word was, because I'm present to it now that it started to shift. For me, it was that I was out of touch with the world of emotions and the world of subtleties. That Akashic record reader that I talked about in episode 3, like she hit it on the head for me. At first I was skeptical of what she was saying, but then I really got it. And I was like, wow, yeah, I am so disconnected from my feelings, because it's kind of how I did my whole life. My feelings got me into trouble. My feelings had me say something to someone which put me out there quite vulnerably, and it ended up hurting my feelings. So it led me down this whole path of, okay, I'm not going to show my feelings. Instead, let me actually be smart. so that I avoid situations like this. I avoid pain. And sure, I've been very intellectual around and strategic around when I would approach somebody to share my feelings. I'd have evidence that she feels the same way first or something. And it was just this very rigid, put together identity that was an armor to keep me safe. And I was thriving in the material world from there. But none of that made a difference in that underlying feeling, right? That poke.
Yeah.
So,
And now?
what it was. Now I'm having the experience that I'm at the very least looking in the right direction. And I think it happened even sooner than I had expected, where I actually have taken a step into that direction, the direction of reconnecting with my emotions, going back to the essence of love, which takes me to a point that I want to emphasize here, right? This whole love is our nature thing. I'm not the teacher. I'm not here in this podcast or in the blog preaching, like, let me tell you how to do life. Let me tell you what love is our nature is all about. So let me show you and teach you. No, I'm its student. That's what really inspired me about this whole message in the blog and the podcast. I used to think like, wow, like, who am I to like teach people about love? Like, I can be arrogant. I can be a jerk. And then that's what inspired me about this message is like, hang on a second. If an arrogant jerk like me can reconnect with my deep nature of love and come from there, if I can do that, if I can accomplish it, anybody can. That's what I'm doing here. Is I'm just sharing my own personal journey, and whatever people might be able to take away from it, great.
Yeah.
But the lessons are not the lessons are not Caesar teaching you. This is simply a platform for the lessons and messages that I'm coming across that come from somewhere else. They've come from the plant medicine or from other teachers that I run into that have a lot of wisdom to share.
Speaking of that, I want to say something. I want to say that, this has been really fun. And there's something that I want to come back. Mm-hmm. Because there's a story that I've been wanting you to share. And really, I think your podcast, I think where it really shines is when in your storytelling. And because just from what you're saying right now about like not being a teacher, you just want to share, and people can take away. I think in the stories that you share, so Caesar has this really great story about a ceremony that he did. And he told it to myself and two other people, and it was like mind-blowing for me. And I've been wanting him to share this for a long time.
Okay.
And I was hoping it was going to be today.
See how sneaky, right? My rational identity is, right? I snuck right past like not having to share that.
So if I do get to come back, which I'm gonna make that happen, I'm gonna make sure that the story gets told because it's such a powerful story.
Yeah.
And I think the world deserves to hear it.
Wow.
And yeah, man, if I can relive that story again, it was, and people can hear it that first time, it could write a book out of that. Let's put it that way.
Wow.
So it's,
yeah, that was a big lesson for me when I heard all of that, when I experienced all of that in my last ceremony. I know the one you're referring to. And here's my promise to you is yes, I will share that story in the very near future. And I'm going to organize some notes. I'm going to write a blog about it. I think, writing is one of my expressions that I really appreciate. And I think that'll do it some justice. And then we can just share it live.
Deal.
All right, bro. Well, Daniel, is there anything else that you want to? Well, here's what I do want to say is if you if you're someone who has struggled with accomplishing your goals around fitness, around exercise, and you're looking for somebody who's going to give you some brotherly love, who's going to be that big brother that gets you going, Daniel's your guy. That's why I wanted to also bring him on here, because I've learned so much about the body, and Daniel has, to me, he's become a master at actually taking care of the body. I mean, you're one of the people that has talked to me about things about body that I never even heard of before. So that's my last question for you, Daniel, is what role has self-love played in fitness for you?
Oh, wow. I really believe that is self-love. And I think that's what makes it last. When you really get that you're not trying to fix something. You're actually trying to love yourself unconditionally. It comes naturally to want to take care of yourself. It comes naturally to want to eat right. It comes naturally to want to exercise. And I think that's the big missing for the majority of the population that I've come in contact with regarding their health. It's always this thing that they're trying to fix, but there's nothing to fix because it's all perfect. We just get in the way. So my whole mission is to really have people experience that self-love.
Yeah.
Now, no matter what they look like, no matter what condition they're in, like they can literally alter their entire body without having to lift a finger. Just really, even just the way they start seeing themselves will make a massive difference. And I was telling you about that I think your whole relationship to yourself can completely change your body. And there's a whole conversation I can have about that and how that process works. But people understanding that their endeavors that go unfulfilled are that because they're not addressing the real problem.
Yeah.
Trying to find solutions to something that isn't broken, and it's just really just letting go.
Nice. Yeah. So if any of that resonates with you, connect with Daniel. You can find him on Instagram at Dan Hyxson, right? That's DanHyxson. You can find his bootcamp program on Instagram also at EmpowerHFNP on Instagram as well. So I'll put those on the description. Daniel, my brother, what a joy it was to have you on here. This episode was a little bit longer than usual, but it's not a surprise.
Yeah,
that's how it goes when you and I talk.
Like 2.5 hours last night.
Yeah, oh. Yeah. Like if we didn't talk enough already. So yeah. Thank you for being in my life. Thank you for being in my corner. I'm here for you as well, and I love that I get to have you in my community. And yeah, man, thank you for being somebody who's out there having people reconnect with their power and just discover what's possible for them and their performance. So any parting words?
I just had fun. Can't wait for the next one. I really want to hear that story. So I'm going to hold him to that. So he said very soon. But, one of the things that we learned to do is to ask by when.
Before the end of March.
Okay, perfect. So you heard it. He said it. You gotta honor it.
All right, we'll do. All right, everybody. Go to loveisthenature.com/podcast. Subscribe to the blog. Subscribe to the podcast. You can subscribe on Spotify, iHeartRadio, or Apple Podcasts. If you go on Apple Podcasts, give us a review. That really helps to get this message out there for more people, to have people rediscover the essence of who they are and experience a whole new level of fulfillment, love, and joy. And you get to be a part of my own journey. So thank you for being a listener. Thank you for being a part of my journey. You will contribute to me just by listening and being part of my reality in that way, and I get to be a part of yours. So thank you. And with that, have a good night. Love you all. Take care. that is all, folks. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for being a valued listener. If you haven't already, remember to subscribe to the podcast in whatever your favorite platform is. You can also watch the video version of the episode on the Love is Our Nature YouTube channel. Check out loveisOurNature.com as well. That's where you can see our latest news and most recent content. If you enjoyed the episode, leave a review, share it with your friends, or email me. I love hearing what you took away for yourself out of listening. My email is Caesar@loveIsOurNature.com. That's CESAR, or Cesar, like my mother says it, at loveIsOurNature.com altogether. Till next time, I'll be here rooting for you. And remember, whatever the question, love is the answer.